You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group, together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
Today we are airing the second part of a two-part episode starring David Mittelman, director of Othram Labs.
And this week, David gets into a discussion with us about how you can help solve cases using your DNA. He talks about three specific websites, DNAsolves.com, which his company, Othram Labs, runs, as well as two other DNA websites where you can share your DNA, which will allow law enforcement to solve unsolved rapes, sexual assaults, murders, and missing persons cases. Those other two sites are FamilyTreeDNA.com, which is allowing law enforcement to use their genealogical database for this type of law enforcement search. And then finally, GEDmatch.com, which if you opt in, you must opt in to law enforcement search, also allows law enforcement agencies around the country to use their database to search and solve cases.
We hope you enjoy the second part of this episode and that you'll consider using your DNA to help law enforcement solve unsolved crimes.
Thanks, and see you again soon on Mind Over Murder. So did that break in that case in spring 2018, did that influence your decision to found Othram?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we were rolling on this most of 2018 and trying to figure out how to put this together. Companies that run complex laboratory operations and are funded to do so, and also have huge software teams, you don't spring those up overnight. So it was obviously a lot of work in the making. But when that data point came out and when people started talking about this more widely, it definitely, I would say, added, gas to the fire, right? I mean, it's one thing to pitch to people like this is a possible thing that could do good for the world. And it's another to see the Golden State Killer, for example, splashed all over the news. So yeah, I mean, every time one of these stories comes out, law enforcement does this, someone does this, these stories are really great because they acclimate law enforcement to the idea that this could be a game changer for their investigation. And then it, of course, de-risks folks like myself that are investing tremendous amounts of time, other people's time, investor money, and so on, all to make this dream come true. So yeah, I would say it substantially, it massively impacted, our interest in the space. I think every win is a validation that this can be done. But again, like the question is, how do you do it in a way that is, robust and scalable, so that everyone can benefit from it? I think maybe it's a less sexy question, but it's really important.
Tell us a little bit about your latest venture, DNAsolves.com. What is that? What is it designed to do?
So GEDmatch was designed as a database for matching folks doing genealogy research. The idea was that if you tested at one company and I tested at another company, if we really wanted to get the most of all our matches, we could both submit our data to GEDmatch and discover relationships that we otherwise wouldn't see because the commercial companies don't talk to each other. So GEDmatch is kind of a bridge across these different services. And there are other tools also that basically let you upload data and learn something new about your DNA sequence. But there's been this ongoing debate, which is what is the right way to consent people? And you have the Family Tree DNA database is opt out, so everyone participates. And then if you don't want to, you go in there and say no. GEDmatch started out that way, then they flipped it to opt in. If you want to help, you have to specifically go in there and do something. I think that's fine. There's pros and cons to those approaches. My feeling on the matter is that two things. Number one, I was looking for a more straightforward way to get people involved. So when you go to DNA Solves, the second line on the website says a database for solving crime, right? So it's very obvious why you're there. We don't do any genealogy really tools at all. In fact, there's no public search. You can't publicly search the database like you can GEDmatch. So there's really nothing you could do there unless you just really want to help solve a crime. And I love that because it's a slower way to grow, but it's a really easy way to consent someone. It's like, you didn't come here because I promised you a medical breakthrough or something else, or to find a long lost relative. You came here because the only thing you could do here is help solve an investigation. So that's one thing. The second thing is that GEDmatch, if you don't consider the consented population, just like the entirety of the database, right? It's like it was a little over 1 million people the last time they reported a number, right? But I'm telling you, there's there's over 30 million people tested, probably 40 million now. So GEDmatch is like a power user tool. Less than 5% of people that have ever done a DNA test even know what GEDmatch is and have uploaded anything there. So I don't think it necessarily makes sense to target the genealogy community and then ask them to go solve crimes. Like from my perspective, there's probably a lot of folks that have never heard of GEDmatch. They're probably not power users of genealogy. But at the same time, if you asked them, would you like to help solve a crime? They'd say, you know what, I'd love to. It's like, imagine how many people listen to your podcast and love true crime and would love to make a difference, but they probably aren't, expert genealogists. And if they aren't, they may or may not have heard of GEDmatch. And obviously more have heard now, but the point remains, like most people that test at 23andMe, they're not doing that to go upload the data to GEDmatch. They're doing it because they saw an ad that said they might learn if they have an interesting trait or something like that. And so we wanted to target the broader audience, and we wanted to do it in a very straightforward way and say, hey, everyone can make a difference. If you'd like to identify, help identify the next person that we're trying to identify, you can upload your data here. And that's what it is. It's a database that you can upload to. It's very similar to GEDmatch, except there's no public search. And the only reason to do that is so law enforcement can use it. It's only available to law enforcement. And its exclusive use and only use is in human identification, in the context of a law enforcement investigation. So it's a very, very simple kind of site. And I wanted to build that. At the time, I was also worried about what was going to happen to GEDmatch. Since we've launched it, I think shortly after we launched DNA Solves, Verigen bought GEDmatch, which is great. It sounds like they've put in resources to keep it going, so that's good. But nonetheless, I think it's important to have redundancy, to have more than one place to push data to. And I, again, wanted to create a site that attracted a broad audience and had a very straightforward and simple message, so that I don't feel like I'm trying to unintentionally bias people or kind of trick them into uploading information. I just wanted to have a site where people can go in and help if they want to help. And I'll tell you that every time a case gets solved, whether we solve one or someone else solves one, it's really cool. Like you'll see people read about it and they're like, oh, how can I help out? And then they go in and they want to contribute. So as people learn more about how their DNA can be used to help solve a crime or identify a victim, there's a growing interest in them wanting to jump in. Some folks want to do it because they like the true crime space. Some folks feel like it's it's their civic duty. They want to help and just want to make a difference. So that's kind of how DNA Solves works. And it's there. Anyone in law enforcement can use it. Anyone that's involved in a law enforcement investigation. And so I think it's grown pretty well since last year and continues to grow. And I think will be a valuable resource.
One of the things we want to do in our conversation about DNAsolves.com is we'll put up information on how our listeners can get involved. So DNAsolves.com, your new website, which is designed to help law enforcement solve crimes. There's no cost?
No. You go to the site and then you can join. There's a couple articles that we have of cases that were solved. We're going to try to post more and more examples so people can kind of see how this technology is used to help. And basically you can go in there, you can join, and you get the option to upload data. One thing that makes us also, I think, a little bit unique is we can accept almost any kind of data. Right now it's primarily the array data that you're getting from these consumer companies. But you basically upload your data, you get a little profile. We do a quick analysis of your data, and we'll show it to you. So you get a little private dashboard, and you can see information about your own DNA. You just, unlike GEDmatch, you can't see information about anyone else. So you can see information about your own DNA. You get a cool little report, and we're continuously updating that, and we'll have additional things in there as well. But again, the primary reason that you've uploaded it at no cost is because you're hoping that it might help one day in an investigation.
What a person would do, a listener would do, would be typically they need to have done one of the consumer DNA databases. So they'll have done Ancestry.com, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA. Will you accept data from all of those consumer databases?
Yeah, we get folks from MyHeritage.
Sorry,
There's
forgot them.
yes, no, it's okay. Some people are now kind of they're the trendsetters. They're doing more of the genome-wide kind of sequencing. So we'll accept that kind of DNA. If you have like what they call next generation sequencing data, we'll accept that data. We even accept FASTA files for mitochondrial sequencing. We just all sorts of stuff. The other thing, by the way, getting into technical details, GEDmatch is based on autosomal DNA. So that's the DNA that you get from mom and dad. But there's two other areas of DNA, right? Your Y chromosome that travels, asymmetrically from father to son, and then the mitochondria, which passes on the mother's line. We collect and analyze that information as well, and that can be valuable in a law enforcement investigation as well. So we'll accept any data, the chip data from the companies you mentioned, sequencing data, mitochondrial data, Y data, just whatever, any data.
And the website walks the person through how they go about doing this.
Yeah, you go to dnasolves.com. You'll click join, and it'll say, do you have data? And if you do, you can go down that path, and there's instructions for how to get your data and upload it. And the other side is if you don't have data, you can actually sign up for it updates. We'll probably launch a swab program at some point to offer some kind of testing. I don't have a lot of details on it yet, but it occurred to me that there's probably a lot of folks that might want to help and participate, but they don't. They have not tested at one of these companies, and they may or may not choose to do so. And if there was a low cost or no cost way for them to contribute a sample as opposed to data from another company, then that would be great too. So that's something that we're exploring. We haven't launched it yet, so not trying to oversell, but it's something that you can sign up for. So when you come to the DNA Solves page, you'll click join. You'll have to answer if you have data or don't. If you don't, you're on a waiting list. And if you do have data, then it walks you through how you upload it. And it's really that simple. It's one page. You just upload your data, and then it crunches a report for you. And you get a little dashboard with results that stem from the analysis of your data. And that's it. So it's like a private GEDmatch.
I was so tempted to say that if you put in a code that says that Kristin Dilley and Bill Thomas sent you, you get the whole thing for free. But, David, you've already been generous enough. So your company is underwriting this and not charging people at all in order to put their data into a DNA database that will help law enforcement solve crime.
Correct. And we, by the way, in addition to not charging the end user, we also don't charge law enforcement right now. So I imagine a resource like that can't be unfunded for eternity, but to the extent that we can, we'd like to subsidize it for as long as possible.
So the whole Kristin and Bill thing, that's not gonna work.
I mean, you can apply a discount, but you're applying a discount on $0. So I think that as we can show utility and value, I think that there are ways to kind of get support, whether from donors or others, to keep the database going. I mean, building a database like that, it costs money to run. So GEDmatch, for example, is not a cheap database to run. And the way GEDmatch has offset, because GEDmatch is free to upload as well, but the way they offset the cost of operating the site is when Curtis was running it, he had a kind of like a freemium option where you can get access to special tools, and it's like a low cost subscription, $10 a month. But he had enough users opting into that he was able to generate money to basically run the site. So there's different models that you can apply. Family Tree DNA charges the law enforcement officers to do a search, but doesn't charge to upload, and they charge for testing if you test through them. So there's various ways to do it. I think the priority right now is to demonstrate utility, and so we will never charge end users because I don't think end users should ever be charged. For now, we don't charge law enforcement, and I would love if we never charge them. I mean, if we can get enough attention for what we're doing. We've been talking to to different advocacy groups and to folks that I think might want to support the opportunity further. And I think it's a big win for law enforcement, right? Because you can use DNA Solves whether you work with Othram or not. They're unrelated. It's just basically, I mean, we're a lab company. Our focus is DNA testing. I built this because I wanted to have something out there to help grow awareness and recruit more information. Because the more information you get, the easier the genealogist will be able to make an identification. And that's something that people also forget is like, I'm a lab guy, so I'm telling you about the struggles of the lab, but the genealogy is not easy. There's a lot of work that goes into the genealogy. Just like I told you, doing good lab work so you can get the right markers and find the most matches, right, will make the life of the genealogist easier. Likewise, having more information to compare against is really important for a genealogist as well. We're building the database. We are building interesting tools, like I said, to do not just autosomal, but mitochondrial and Y analysis as well. And then we've been working with a number of genealogists to kind of start imagining next generation tools to help kind of make their life easier. What are things that they're doing in the investigative process that we can either simplify or automate? And so I think in the long term, DNA Solves will have a lot more tools, which will always make available to like the end user if they want to play around with their data. I like having the end user play around with data because it lets them see what information is being retrieved from the sequence, right? So it's like a very transparent thing. You can see if I uploaded my data to DNA Solves, what are people learning from it? And then at the same time, those same tools can be then vetted, validated, and pushed to law enforcement or to genealogists working for law enforcement to move an investigation forward.
You know, one of the big concerns that people have continually brought up about the DNA databases is the privacy concern issue.
Yeah.
What is your response to people who say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to upload my DNA. I'm worried about my privacy.
Yeah. So, there's a couple things. First of all, when you do public searching, there's always the concern that in a public search, it's possible to unintentionally share more information than you want, and allow people to kind of, in a sinister way, extract or gain knowledge of other people's genetic data. So that we've mitigated by simply banning any public search. That's the easiest way to solve that problem. But the other question in general is like, it's kind of more of a broader question. Is like, if I give you DNA, then you may have information about me, right? So the one thing we do I think is really important is, our work is for human identification only, right? So there's no medical part to this. There's no like, we're going to use this in a research study with a pharmaceutical company or someone else. The data has single use, and it's just human identification. So I think that also reduces the risk. Ultimately, is there any exposure or risk from sharing information? Yeah, there is. There always is. There's a risk that's associated with having a cell phone. There's a risk that's associated with having a camera on your computer so that you can do video chat. So I think technology constantly introduces risk. And I think it's a personal decision as to whether the benefits of the technology outweigh the disadvantages. I mean, the cell phone is a terrible security risk, but it also brings a lot of value. And most people have elected to just use the phone, but some don't. Some don't think it's a good idea, and they get older phones without GPS trackers and other such technologies. So I would say I definitely don't want to like enforce, try to push or even slightly push people to do things against what they want. But I would say that we do the best we can in terms of making the search not public and limiting the scope of use exclusively to human identification, which I don't think any other company does. My laboratory, by the way, Othram, is likewise is a human identification DNA testing site, and not a multi-purpose lab like a lot of the other labs that run these kind of tests. That's the best that I could come up with. I'm always open to ideas. I talk to people all the time. Had a lot of discussions with folks in the genealogy community about informed consent and better ways to educate people on the risks and rewards of doing this kind of testing. But beyond all that, all I can say is it's a personal decision. And if you don't want to participate, then don't. But I will tell you this, there's plenty of folks that are really excited about this. And so I much prefer to simply provide a safe and secure way for people that already have affinity, right? They're already interested in crime, or they think it's their civic duty. They just want to get involved. I'd rather just work with those folks and not pressure people to do something they don't want to do.
No, that makes perfect sense. And the other thing is, look, I've engaged in some debate, I hope respectfully, within the genealogy community over the last year or two. And I think we have to be grown up about this. Here we are, all of us are participating in and listening to this podcast. Most of us are going to be listening on a cell phone or a computer or what have you. I think we've all got to be grown up enough to admit that privacy, which was probably a myth to start with, went out the window the first time any of us signed up for our first email address, our first cell phone. I mean, I'm thinking about my old school Nokia candy bar phone. It didn't do very much, but as David, as you're saying, people seem to forget that the very powerful device that we all carry around in our pocket now and throw up in a cup holder in our car and drive around is actually tracking our every move, every phone call, every email, every text, every web search. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. When did everybody think that their privacy was so violated because their DNA was put in with, in many cases, tens of millions of other people's DNA? I think it's the height of arrogance for people to be worried that they're going to be cloned because, so of the how many billion people live on the planet? 7 billion, I think. We're going to clone, you above all others. I'm not particularly worried about this kind of stuff. Obviously, Kristin and I have an agenda, and it overlaps significantly, David, with you and your team, which is we're really interested in seeing cold cases get solved, the DNA Dope Project identifying human remains that deserve to be acknowledged as the people that they were and not Joe and John and Jane Does in this sad netherworld where their bodies have been found, but we've never even been able to give them a name. There's so much good that can come out of this amazing new world that, you're leading the charge in. I see so much upside. Should there be cautions? Should there be a respect for the individual? Of course. I don't think most of us need to worry too much about our privacy when on any given day, we give out more information about ourselves willingly without even thinking about it. And then suddenly we get all hinky because David's going to be in a lab down in Texas building clones of Kristin Dilley. I mean, it's just crazy. Even though maybe having extra Kristin Dilleys would be a good thing.
No, the world doesn't need more than one of me, I promise.
Well, good teachers are hard to find.
I think a lot of it just comes down to educating folks. I mean, the concerns about privacy span decades, back to the 70s and probably before that. But I remember there was a Time magazine cover. I can't remember when it was, but there was a Time magazine cover. I used it in a talk that I gave once on privacy. And it's got this person cowering in fear as a humanized looking, tape recorder and camera and all these other things are basically invading the space of this person. And I think it was a commentary on how the fact that people have portable cameras and can do point and click photography, the fact that there's tape recorders and other things that are emerging, these technologies are going to basically surveil you, right, and steal your privacy. And that again happened as Google and social media came to rise. And then it continues to happen now that people are beginning to learn that there's information in DNA that could do things. So this is just an ongoing theme, in humanity, which is you want to take advantage of technology. But every time a new piece of technology comes, there's a risk that it can invade an aspect of your privacy. And it's usually through the process of time and acclimation and also education that you learn to kind of which of the fears that you really are concerned about, which ones you'll just let go. Cameras have certainly invaded a lot of people's privacy. If they didn't have cameras, a lot of stuff would go unnoticed. But people have, by and large, become okay with cameras. So I think I will tell you, and this is coming from a personal bias, so don't take this as me trying to push in one direction or the other. But I think if I had to stack rank all the information about me, my genetic sequence is not really high on the list of privacy violator. I wouldn't want someone to have a video camera inside my house, look at my children. People like to keep their bank records private, those kind of things. Conversations you have with your spouse, those are things that are I think a lot more concerning. There's not a whole lot of information to grab out of the DNA that I think could be used against you. I say that in a blanket statement. Everything that's information can be used against you, but it's I don't think DNA is the riskiest thing. And there's a lot of value as well. So I think people were scared about banking online originally. And most people bank online now. And there are going to be breaches and there are things to consider. So that's why I'm saying you can't totally dismiss it and you have to educate. But everyone has to make a personal decision. Do I want to keep my money under a mattress or do I want to bank with someone? And they choose to generally bank with someone. It's do I want to drive to the bank every day? Do I want to use an online system? I'll use the online system. And so here's the same way is there's a chance to do good and catch folks. In a sense, I think it comes, even if you're not the victim of a crime, and even if you're not the family member of the victim of a crime, it all comes back to benefit you because there's two things that happen if we deploy this technology broadly. Number one, we start solving crimes. So I see a future where repeat crime becomes very uncommon, right? Because if they do something, you'll catch them and they won't do it again. The second thing is I see that it becomes a deterrent. So it's interesting because there's a lot of criminal justice studies, right, that look at what kind of punishments should we impose for crimes. And I don't think that punishment, or rather severity of punishment, is a huge incentivizer or rather deterrent against committing a crime. But what I think people have found time and time again is that the risk of getting caught is a deterrent for crime. And if you knew that if you're going to kill someone and leave DNA at the scene, that there was a really high chance you're going to get caught, I think that in itself becomes a deterrent. And if you knew that there weren't backlogs and that police were just processing these tests anytime they needed and they were getting timely results, then I think that would add to your anxiety in deciding whether you want to commit a crime or not. And there'll of course be the crimes of passion, but there's a lot of opportunistic crime. And that crime, I think, is more likely to be deterred by fear of getting caught than it is by a specific sentence or punishment or whatever. I think in that way, as everyone does their part to help, that's the reward that everyone's going for long term. You bring immediate value to a family, to people that were previously suspects and now can go on living their life. Like, people forget when you identify someone that eventually is found to have committed a crime, how many other people were also considered for to be a suspect, right? And how many other people were persons of interest, and how many of those can now go on and live their life? So for every crime you solve, even if it's not a victim, even if you find a perpetrator, you improve the lives of so many other people around you, and that's an immediate value. And then long term, you've got a deterrent to crime, because I'm telling you, like, these stories come out, people are going to think twice. And then you also have the practicality in being able to efficiently solve crimes. And like I said, I think that there'll be a time when repeat crime does not happen anymore. Certainly these kind of violent crimes, you'll only be able to do that, one or two times before you get caught.
No, and you raise a really good point, too, which is there are people like the Innocence Project that are doing really worthwhile work where they're using DNA technology to go back and take a look at cases. And something that's very sad, there are thousands and thousands of people currently incarcerated for horrific crimes that they did not commit.
And how do they get priority? We're struggling to clear the sex assault kit backlog. There's countless other crimes that have to be triaged. Like, is something we can do testing for? Is it going to wait? And then you have folks that are in prison that some subset of them should not be in prison. It's like, how do they get up on the list? Like, how do they actually get to the point where they can get to them? So I think that's why I'm telling you, like, a big part of what's important to me is not if you can solve a crime. Like, you can obviously solve crimes. I mean, there's several have been solved. The question is, how do you take this technology in a way that it can be used broadly and for everybody? This is exactly one of the positive outcomes of that, is that you would be able to, to solve problems that just don't rank at the highest list of priority possible for law enforcement groups. I mean, they can only do so much. And if they're clearing backlogs, catching current criminals, and then they also have to figure out who belongs in jail, who doesn't. It feels ultimately irresponsible to have someone, in this situation of purgatory. Like, if they should be in jail, put them in jail. And if they shouldn't be in jail, get them out. And if a DNA test can answer that question, it just seems like it's the right thing to do to deploy that technology. So you do what it takes to get it out there, education, validation, and so on. But then you get it out there so that people can start using it. And there's already a case, right? There's a guy that spent 15 years in prison and was released after they used whatever form of genealogy you want to call it to identify the person that was truly involved. So again, like, does it work? Yes, for sure. The question is, how do we get it out there so that the Innocence Project and everyone else can benefit from it as well?
No, it's funny because, you were talking a minute ago about decreasing costs, improving sensitivity, and simplifying the process. And of course, those all sound like admirable goals, and they are. But if you actually then succeed in those goals, now you're making something which you mentioned used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and
Yep.
now is getting less and less expensive. And the capability that the Othram Lab and your team are implementing would allow us to use this much more broadly, which would result in there's so many opportunities here to test the 400,000 untested rape kits sitting on law enforcement shelves, to solve 200,000 cold case murders currently unsolved in the United States, to get people out of jail that don't belong there, and to put people in jail that do. And then I never really thought about the deterrent factor, which is that someone might hesitate to commit another crime because they recognize I'm now going to be identified as a serial offender.
When I talked to my investors originally, they were like, "What's the?" So I want to mention something real quick. You actually touched on a good point. So it's really weird. Like, if you talk outside of the space, outside of the people that actually are in law enforcement or like you guys, really immersed in this field, you'll get the sense that they feel like there's infinite opportunity for diagnostic testing. but then you like ask them about forensics, and forensics is like this forgotten field. I think it's one of the reasons why technology has lagged. There's a lot of reasons, but that's one reason. And they're like, well, is that really a big market? I talked to people early on about raising money to go tackle this problem, and the most common feedback is like, well, there's not that many crimes, or they'll probably catch them eventually. So I think that's another area. That's why I like your podcast. Another area of lack of education isn't just the science, but it's also the magnitude of the problem. It's because of like organizations like Joyful Heart, right? Where people actually put a spotlight on these kits that weren't being run, because before it was like, oh, there's probably some kits. But when that spotlight came on and they launched that End the Backlog website, all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, there's like 400,000 of these cases. And that's just the one that we were able to account for. Who knows how many got lost or whatever. So I think that's a huge problem. I think that everyone, including you guys, can do your part to let people that are not in this field understand that the size of the problem is actually quite extensive. And likewise, the size of the opportunity to do good is enormous.
Oh, and
that's one thing.
It's worth talking about too. When I was a kid, and I'm older than both of you young whippersnappers. When I was a kid, the closure rate for murders, this would have been in the 1960s, was over 90%. It's now in the 60%, mid 60% range and falling. I know we all get really excited hearing about all these advancements and watching procedurals on TV. People talk about the CSI effect. We've all been sold a bill of goods, not intentionally perhaps, but we've all enjoyed seeing crime solved on TV by amazing scientists in state-of-the-art labs, all wearing designer clothes and 4-inch heels, and apparently never getting their hands dirty. The truth is, we've been sold a bill of goods, and I worked in film and TV, so I guess I'm part of that. We're not solving anywhere near the perceived percentage of, and I'm talking about serious crime here, murder, rape, sexual assault. If you kill somebody tomorrow, and I hope you don't, the chances are about 40% that you're going to get away with it, because we're only solving 60% or so of the cases that are currently out there. And the percentage is headed in the wrong direction. So I actually see limitless opportunity. There's 17,000 law enforcement agencies across the country, all of whom I think would like to have this level of sophistication in terms of forensic testing available to them. And so when you talk about improving sensitivity and reducing costs and streamlining the process, I know that gets a little loose, a little nebulous. That sounds like the entrepreneur talking.
Yeah. It sounds like, but at the end of the day, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and there's always going to be a cooler case to solve.
You want to bet?
You're the smartest guy in this room right at the moment.
I mean, if I was to self-describe myself, I feel more like, I'm an engineer. I understand that I help work on a lot of technologies. At Othram, like we're not trying to be like, we're not trying to solve something in like the coolest way possible, and we may not have like the highest profile case that is discovered, but what I see myself as an engineer. And so there's a concept that we've known about for years, known about probably for more than years, but at least in the last few years, this concept has been initially validated, right? And that you can take technology that does more than what CODIS does, and you can solve a case. So now it's the role of engineering to figure out how to take that. And it's not that I'm trying to be nebulous or entrepreneur-like. It's like the question is like, how do you take that? So I'll give you an example from my space, where I historically come from, which is medicine. You work in the lab and you give this drug to a mouse, and all of a sudden the mouse is disease-free. And that's an amazing concept. And you make a discovery and you get a prize and you publish a paper. But there is a long road ahead from that point to where you've got something that's being offered by physicians in a clinic when you come in and test positive for some condition. And that's the engineering process. That's the process by which you engineer affordable, scalable, and broadly deployable, simple solution that isn't $1 zillion to make people better. And so the same thing is true here. You have amazing case studies every day, but someone has to go in and do just kind of like I actually find this work exciting, but I mean, I understand that some find it boring. Is like, how do you engineer it and get everyone on board with it? Because there's just tremendous amounts of work that needs to be done to get all the stakeholders from law enforcement, the legal system, from the forensic community around figuring out how to make this work. And again, we did this in my first startup in medicine. We teamed up actually with NIST. So we teamed up with a government agency and decided to go build the standard for medical sequencing. And now everyone's doing it. And so I think that'll happen here. I would love to be part of that. So as they say, like, the only thing that's better than following the standard is developing the standard. So I'd like to help develop that standard, because I think it'll be a win for all the players in the space. It'll move things along faster. Same with DNA Solves. I built DNA Solves because I just want to get things moving, and I want to get more data available. So again, everyone can benefit, because it feedbacks. As long as anybody in this small space, and there's not a lot of players in this testing space, you can name all the companies on a hand. The more wins all of us have, the more wins everyone has, because again, it just grows that adoption. And the thing I was going to tell you earlier, and I kind of got derailed on another path, is that when I first talked to my investors, I don't know if all of them share my optimism and yours on the size of this ability to benefit, a lot of people. I think some do and some may not. But the question was like, well, what is your goal? Like, where do you see this 10 years from now, right? Like, why are we investing in this venture? And my metric, the fancy entrepreneur folks call these KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. What is the metric which you'll judge success? For me, I think if you can demonstrate that you're able to drop crime rate for any of these crimes, or you're able to drop repeat crime, like that's how you know you succeeded. So that's a big project. It'll probably take the rest of my life, but I got plenty of time. That's where I want to apply all of my effort. And that's what drives the decisions that we make. So sometimes we're willing to take longer bets and do things a little bit slower, maybe initially a little more complicated. We want to avoid shortcuts, because the goal is not to make a quick buck this year or next year. The goal is to change how crime is solved, and then to actually see an impact, whether it's on crime rate or on solve rate. I think either of those would be fascinating metrics to benchmark the success, not just of Othram, but I think the entire field. It's like, how do you know this field was worth it? You'll know because all of a sudden there'll be changes to how crime is solved, how often it's solved, and then whether crime rate in general decreases. That's the point that we're sailing towards with our compass.
So, David, leave our listeners with one action step that they can take right now to help you in your quest to drop these crime rates and to increase the solve rates. What can they do right now to help you out?
So I think the biggest thing that the people that are not in the field or not experts can do is, if they feel comfortable, they should contribute data. I think that the more the data that's available, the more of a network we can build of folks, the easier it is to take these people, as I said earlier, that are lost to time and plug them into our collective family tree. So I think the simplest way is, if you have data and you feel comfortable, learn about the pros and cons and get involved. And DNA Solves is a very simple, like, one website path. You just go in there, it's like one page, and you upload your data and you've made a contribution. I think there are a number of organizations that are now trying to grow awareness around this. For those that don't want to contribute DNA data, but they have resources, there's a lot of resources needed in this space, whether it's raising awareness and pushing people on the political side to drive an investigation that's being forgotten. So raising your voice so people know about investigations that should not kind of fade away. Whether it's financial contributions to nonprofits that raise money to try to fund and do some of the extra work necessary to close out a case. I mean, there's lots of ways people can get involved, but the simplest way is just learning more about what this technology is, making an informed opinion and contributing your data, and then spreading the word. It's the other thing you could do, is just spreading the word about these other kinds of methods that will one day help make repeat crime a thing of the past and create a really powerful deterrent for future crimes. So I think, that's probably the best way people can help.
Well, I'm inspired. And so
Me
just to recap then, there are currently 3 DNA databases that I'm aware of that assist law enforcement. There's GEDmatch with their opt-in option. You must opt in to allow for law enforcement search anonymously of your DNA. Family Tree DNA, their current policy is that if you sign up with Family Tree DNA, your DNA is available to law enforcement for search. And now there's the new DNASolves.com website, which David Mittelman and his team at Othram have built and are operating, which is completely free. They aren't even charging law enforcement to search their database, and their database is specifically tailored to allow all of us to take our DNA profiles, typically from consumer databases like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, MyHeritage, and so on, and to upload it at no charge. It's something you can do from home very easily while we're all waiting out the coronavirus. Here's another fun thing for you to do that actually will help other people. DNAsolves.com is up now and available. We'll include links in our show notes for this podcast. David, this is really inspiring and exciting, and I don't think, speaking for Kristin and me, I don't think we were bored not 1 minute. This is fascinating work.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much for all the really, really excellent work that you're doing, David.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and I appreciate you guys spreading the word of all these other cases. Like I said, I think half the battle is just raising awareness for all of this and keeping these stories alive so people know about them and they're in everyone's mind, and they can apply the right resources to solve them.
Well, I think the work you're doing is amazing. And as soon as we get back to air travel, it's my intention to get down to see you in Houston and tour the facility. I'm sure that the work will continue. I know that we're operating under unusual circumstances at the moment, but as things move forward again, I'm so thrilled that you're able to continue the good work that you're doing at Othram, and stay healthy and take care of that beautiful family while you're at it.
Yes. You guys stay healthy as well. And again, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, David. We appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll include in our show notes links to 3 websites where you can share your DNA to help solve unsolved murders, rapes, and sexual assaults, as well as missing persons cases. They include GEDmatch, and you must opt in for law enforcement search of your DNA, Family Tree DNA, and the new website that David Mittelman mentioned, DNA Solves. You can upload your DNA profiles from any of the top consumer DNA genealogy sites that many of us have participated in. Things like Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage.com. DNA Solves is basically set up to take profiles from any of those sites, and you can upload them at no charge and make your DNA available anonymously for law enforcement to help solve these unsolved cases. And it's among the most important things that any of us can do to help fight crime. Next week, we expect to be crossing over a very important threshold, and that is our first 50,000 downloads of Mind Over Murder. We can't thank you enough for your support. The most important thing you can help Mind Over Murder with is spreading the word about our podcast. Please rate our podcast on your favorite platform. Write something if you have a moment or two. And please tell your friends about Mind Over Murder. Thank you so much for your support. We'll see you again next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.